Hello, and welcome to another edition of Redleg Roundtable. I am really pleased today to welcome in our new guest, Kim Nuxhall. Kim, thanks for joining us.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for having me. Good to talk
Well,
some
it is.
baseball here.
Yeah, this is great. I mean, certainly our Reds, as they're getting ready to start the playoffs, our Reds didn't get there this year, but there's a little hope for the future with some of these players we've got, don't you think?
Yeah, some really, really nice young players. It's going to be a matter of staying healthy, really.
Mm-hmm.
Some
That
of
was a
these
big
kids
thing this
back.
year, wasn't it?
Yeah. It's interesting. I was thinking I would love to look at other teams and kind of compare where the Reds were with injuries with other teams, but it sure seemed like it was a large number of players out this year. But that's part of the game, as we know. You have to figure it out.
Yeah, they entered September around that time with 5 full starting pitchers on the injured list. So those were guys we were going to count on all year, we hoped. Well, hey, Kim, glad to have you on. We're going to talk about so many things today. I really appreciate your time, so thanks so much. I want to go through this a little bit. You were born, I believe, from what the internet tells me, you were born in 1954, right?
Yes, I made it to the next zero just a while back there.
Yeah,
you're 70. Yes.
Okay. Yeah, my dad turned 70 in
Glad
December.
to be around for it too.
It's nice. Yeah. Hey, so one thing I don't think a lot of people know about you, maybe you were a professional baseball player yourself.
I did get a little shot at it. Yeah.
The cool thing is on Baseball Reference, you're listed as a pitcher, outfielder, and a shortstop.
They tried to find a spot for me.
Yeah. Well, but you also played third base, but you played for the Reds farm system, and you also played 1 year in the Seattle minor leagues. Tell me a little bit about kind of that, and especially the time you spent in the minor leagues.
Yeah. So, high school senior year, I had a fair year. Didn't get drafted, but went down for a tryout that the Reds had annually. They brought in all the potential draft picks to Riverfront Stadium at the time. And I got to throw against some college kids, and I was young. I was only 17 coming out of high school.
That seems like a theme for your family.
Yeah. Dad was 2 years younger, but
That's right.
So I had one of those days where I just had it. I had a really live fastball, and at that point, I was intending to go to Gulf Coast Junior College. Joe Bowen was the director of scouting for the Reds. He thought, since I was young, because I had gone to a tryout the previous year, because I was so young, I was thin. I think, of course, they thought I was going to grow. Dad was 6'3". My uncles were all large. I remember Mr. Bowen looking at my hands saying, "Boy, he's got big hands, so you like that." And I think they thought I was going to grow. So he thought it'd be best if I went to a junior college, Gulf Coast Community College, spend a couple of years there, and then they would draft me. Well, on that day, like I said, I just had it. And he offered me a bonus to sign. And so I signed that day and ended up in Bradenton the rest of that summer, and just did okay. Really had trouble with, now they use the term command. Back then it was control. So I struggled with that. So I was still only 17. I came back the following year, spent the whole year in Bradenton, and really didn't improve a whole lot. And the following year, they wanted to try me at shortstop because I had a good arm. I was just controlling the ball, throwing it where I wanted to over the plate. So tried shortstop. They sent me to Seattle. Actually, it wasn't Seattle's farm team. It was the Reds team.
Oh, I'm sorry.
The team that the Reds supported up in Seattle in the Northwest League. Yeah. So I went up there. Really, it was just 2.5 weeks. They brought in a high draft pick, and then I was sent home then. But I loved every minute of it. It was a great experience. I still in touch with former friends, and it's kind of cool. One of the catchers, local kid, Marlon Stiles, he and I have reconnected. He's actually on our board of directors. So those connections over nearly 50 years ago are still going strong.
That's awesome. Now, you mentioned you mentioned high school. You went to Fairfield, is that right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so Fairfield High School, and then you do that. But you ended up spending 32 years as a teacher or some form of an educator in
Right.
Fairfield,
Yeah.
is that right?
So when I was playing ball, I went to it's kind of instilled in us being my brother and I to attend college. So I attended Miami University in the off season, and during that time, I also helped a local friend of mine. He was coaching a little basketball league, and um, I really enjoyed helping kids. And he encouraged me. He said, "Oh, you know, you ought to go into teaching." Physical education. It's great. You see every kid in the school. So I helped the next few years, and I thought, after I was finished playing ball, that would be a good career for me, and it turned out great. I taught 32 years at Central Elementary, and developed halfway through my career a real passion for teaching character education. And I found how that had a tremendous impact on my kids and myself and the culture
Mhm.
of my classroom. And that kind of encouraged me to start the Character Education Fund back in 2003.
And the community work that your dad did, your dad Joe Nuxhall, and then you have done is amazing. You're currently, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, you're the president and board chairman of the Nuxhall Foundation.
Yes,
And that
yes, yeah,
oversees the Joe Nuxhall Character Education Fund you mentioned,
right,
and the Joe Nuxhall Miracle League Fields,
right.
which we'll talk about some more. Was it kind of like your dad's way also, and maybe instilled in you and your brother, maybe to kind of give back? Was that part of the way you were
Yeah,
raised?
definitely. I always said the day Dad signed his contract at age 15 is the day he began giving back. He knew how fortunate he was to have that experience to play Major League Baseball, and he knew it wouldn't have happened without the support of his Butler County, Hamilton, Fairfield, and Greater Cincinnati. And I really think that was his way of giving back, and that was instilled in us. He started actually the scholarship fund is another facet of the foundation. Started that in 1985 with a golf outing, and that's still going strong. But yeah, it was in him to give back for sure.
Well, let's talk about him a little bit if you're willing. Speaking of baseball reference pages, he's got one of the strangest ones out there because a lot of folks understand he pitched in 1944 as a 15-year-old, and then he didn't play again in the major leagues until 1952.
Right.
So that's quite a stretch there. Obviously, you weren't around as 10 years before you were around, but what did your dad ever say, or what did other people around your family say about him? Because I assume World War II was raging on and things like that.
Right.
But what about him signing as a 15-year-old and going down there and he got into one game?
Right. Right. Yeah. It's pretty amazing story, and I found some things out reading through. My mom was a great scrapbooker. Um, she's got his whole career scrapbooked, and I've really discovered some really interesting pieces to that story. Um, he was actually discovered when he was about age 14. Scouts had come out. They were out looking for ball players. It was during the war. And they discovered Dad while they were actually scouting his dad, my grandfather.
Okay.
They were both playing in this municipal league in Hamilton. And my grandpa, they called him the Ox. He was a big burly person, and he was still playing. So and again, they discovered Dad. Who's that? That's Sonny. They called Dad back then. Had him down to a tryout. I think it was in late August of '43, I believe it was, and they offered a minor league contract to him, and his parents uh, didn't want him to sign, and the Reds kind of wooed him a little bit. I shake my head at this, and that summer of '43, they took him on a road trip to St. Louis. I mean, imagine he had just turned 15,
Mm-hmm.
and imagine sending your kid on a road trip on a train to St. Louis with a major league team. So the following year, 1944, they offered him a major league contract, and that's when he signed on February 18th, 1944. He signed the contract, and he would go down to when the season started on weekends, I guess, with the ball team. That's that season of '44. Then when school was out, he just finished the ninth grade. They had him down Crosley Field during the game on June 10th, 1944. The Reds were getting beat pretty bad by St. Louis, and next thing you know, manager called his name, and he was pitching in a game. And I think the thing I shake my head at that outing was the thought of him facing Stan Musial, at age 15, and Stan, I guess, roped a single off of him, I guess. But the other neat, I think, part of the whole story, you mentioned him not coming back till later, is the fact that he stuck it out for 7 years in the minor leagues, various cities and such. So it's a great story of perseverance. But the reality is he was still just 22 years old when he made it back to the major.
Sure. Yeah. And I mean, that time was full of some publicity stunts around the league, and somebody looking from afar might say, "Oh, well, that was just another one. He might not even be back."
Yeah.
But that next year, 1945, he's 16 years old, and he put up a 2.57 ERA in the minor leagues with 11 complete games.
Yeah.
I mean, this is
it was legit. Yeah. I kind of thought that too, and then I read through some articles. And comments from his manager and the Reds, it definitely wasn't a publicity stunt. They thought he had the tools to make it. He was 6'3", 195 pounds at age 15, and that's a big boy back then, But I think his skills were definitely legitimate.
Oh yeah, he came back in 1952 to the big leagues, and he never left again until 1966. So what a career. He made 2 All-Star teams. Baseball Reference, they use that wins above replacement. There's a little different than a couple of the others, but he had a 30.4 WAR, which is very good. A career 3.90 ERA.
Yeah, respectable.
I mean, that's really good. Now, I want to ask you, you were born 10 years later, after that 1944 appearance.
Right.
What are your memories of your dad as a baseball player?
Yeah. I still shake my head at the experiences I got. I love baseball. What I loved about it too is Dad never forced it on me. I just loved it. I loved going down to the ballpark, and I'm 7, 8 years old shagging fly balls at Crosley Field with the likes of Frank Robinson and Veda Pinson, and along comes Pete Rose, and I got to go on road trips when I was a kid. People ask me what's one of your all-time favorite things you got to do, and it's taking batting practice with the big red machine in the Astrodome. I'm in the same group as Joe Morgan and Bench and Rose and them. And who's the batting practice pitcher? It's my dad. So that brings me to tears even now to think. But gosh, just so many great memories. I was very fortunate. Just came back from Florida on St. Pete Beach, and where we stay there is where we just down from where we stayed when Dad was pitching. A little brick house there on the beach, and good memories there. I got to go to spring training every year as a kid. So. Yeah, I was very, very fortunate growing up, and I still am. I'm getting to do amazing things because of Dad, really.
Well, you hear about even the Griffeys and people like that. They were younger than you, as Ken and Eduardo Perez, and some of those guys, even their brothers. But the amazing thing for you is your dad's from there, from Hamilton, and then you grew up there.
Right.
So it's not just, hey, this is where my dad's almost like stationed, this is home, and here you are. So what was it like kind of being around town with your dad being Joe Nuxhall?
Yeah. There's a great book. I think it was Walter Cronkite's daughter wrote it, called Living on the Edge of the Spotlight. and it's so true. you go to a restaurant and it's almost like my mom and my brother and I became invisible. Everybody went to dad, but we understood that's the way it was. Dad was always embarrassed that people would use the word celebrity. He just wanted to be one of the people, one of the members of the community. His favorite things to do was hanging out with his buddies, playing golf at local golf course, Potters on Twin Run. He played with Walter Alston. You may not know, lived in Dartown, so Walter would play golf at a local golf course, But Dad truly just loved hanging out with his friends. I think if he had a choice between going to New York with the glitz and glamour of a ball game or hanging out with his buddies, he'd take that, being with his hometown people all the time. But he loved them and they loved him back. And that's what's so incredible about now, 17 years since his passing. We still feel that same support.
Who were some of the teammates your dad was closest to? Do you recall that at all?
Oh yeah, gosh, Wally Post. Wally would come down anytime he came to speak in town. He would stay with us, and vice versa. Dad would go up there. Gus Bell, Jim O'Toole, Gordy Coleman, and him were buddies. And all the old timers. Ed Bailey as catcher.
Oh yeah,
Maloney, of course Frank Robinson, Beta Pinson, and such. But I think probably Gus. Gus being local too, and Wally were probably his two best buddies. Yeah.
Well, it was interesting when I went to college. I went to Ohio State, and Wally Post. I don't even remember if it was like a great nephew or what the relationship, but one of the boys was from St. Henry, Ohio, and his last name is Post.
Yeah.
And so, I knew the name, obviously. I grew up reading all the books about Charlie Hustle and then some of the other books about the Reds. So I knew exactly who that was. And as you mentioned, the Bell family, certainly synonymous with Cincinnati as well.
Yeah.
My grandfather's favorite player was Gordy Coleman for a stretch there. And I know Gordy even did TV, so your dad and he would have been together on the road even in the 80s there before Gordy's passing.
Yeah.
So, you're right there. The idea of like, you're telling me some of the things you did, kind of like, you got the take batting practice, you got the shag flies. Do you remember any specific games your dad pitched, like the scenario involved or anything like that?
Yeah, I remember going to the park and watching him, and of course driving down I-75 wasn't there back then, so we'd go down Pleasant Avenue 127. But specifically games, no. I do remember. And I think it was a great lesson for us that, sitting in the stands and people yelling at dad, and mom, I think indirectly taught us, never to say anything. They paid to get there. They have a right to say things. So we never, certainly ever got into any exchange with anyone. So I think that was a good lesson of kind of self-control for us. But specific games, I remember I think I was listening to the game. I remember it was a unique game where dad pitched I think it was a 1 or a 2 hitter, and the opposing pitcher pitched a no hitter and lost, if you remember that, by Ken Johnson of the Astros. Pitched a no hitter and actually lost the game. But I think I remember listening to that one.
That's great.
Yeah.
What was it like in 61? He goes to Kansas City, and then in 62 he's at the Angels out in LA, that's another world away. What was it like for you?
I chuckle at that one because I specifically remember I was 6 years old. I was in the kitchen, and it was the summer of 61, maybe spring. And my mom came in and said, "Your dad's been traded to Kansas City." I vividly remember looking up at her and saying I wasn't going. I was going to live there by myself at age 6.
That's
I
great.
ended up going to Kansas City.
Hmm.
That was, I have some memories of that because Charlie Finley owned that team at Kansas City Athletics. And Charlie, as you know, was always thinking outside the box, but he came up with the fireworks idea to
Okay.
shoot fireworks after a home run or after a win. So that was always cool for us to go to the ballpark and see the fireworks. One of the interesting things he did, there was a terrace in right field, and he to keep the grass under control, he had sheep out there. And not only did he have sheep, he would have them all dyed a different color. So you would look out on the terrace and see a red sheep, green sheep, yellow sheep. So that was kind of fun. He just, Charlie was always coming up with something. So
Yeah, I was thinking of him or Bill Veck, and the things
right,
that the
right.
showmen that they
Yeah.
were back in those days.
The other cool thing, and I hadn't thought about this till maybe 10 years ago. The Reds went to the World Series that year. The dad was in Kansas City, and I hadn't really thought about it. Dad pitched against the Yankees that summer, the very team that would face his former team in the World Series. So, Dad pitched against, Mickey Mantle and Maris and them, who would go on to play against, the Reds. So I thought that was kind of cool. And then I discovered too that Dad pitched, I don't know which number, but one of Maris's 61 home runs was
Oh,
his
yeah.
dad. So anyway, some cool
Yeah.
kind of interesting history there.
Well, so he had been traded in January 61. And then in December of 61, he gets released by the Athletics.
Yeah.
And interestingly enough, he was signed by the Baltimore Orioles,
Right.
which I never knew that because he never pitched for them.
Yeah.
And then he was purchased by the Los Angeles Angels on April 9th of 62 by the Angels.
Yeah.
So your mom probably felt like a yo-yo going back.
Right. I think we were in West Palm Beach for spring training with the Orioles.
Mm-hmm.
And I do remember some of what being in LA when he was with the Angels. And then he got, I guess, let go by the Angels and then picked up by the Reds. We ended up in San Diego. And they were called the Padres. The Reds, I guess that was the Reds AAA team at the time.
Okay.
Yeah, I have some memories of that.
May of 62, he re-signed with the Reds. And again, not that common, to think, well, this team released me. My career might be just about over, and he pitches all the way until 1966.
Yeah.
So he, in 62, he was with the AAA club with the Reds, and he went 9-2 for them before getting called back up.
Yeah. Quite a journey.
Yeah, I mean, it's really remarkable, and I know I have the book here somewhere about him that Orange Frazier put out that certainly told me a lot more than I already knew. And the thing about it is, for us Reds fans, except I'm in my mid-40s, so I guess I would judge it maybe 5 to 10 years younger than me, and then people older than me.
Right.
We know him as the old left-hander and certainly the radio voice. Before we get to that, though, you mentioned a few players. I guess I'd just like to say a few names, and if you have any remembrances or thoughts, just throw them at me, and we'll move through this part quick.
Right.
Frank Robinson, just amazing.
Oh yeah, Dad felt. I know Dad felt he was one of the top 3 players in history in his mind. Willie Mays is at the top, but I know Frank's he's certainly in the upper 5. Yeah, Frank. Great memory of Frank. Dad, at the end of the season, would have ball players come up and they'd play his local buddies in a softball game. And I remember Frank, when he came up one time, he came to our house and took a nap on our hallway. So that's one of those. Again, I shake my head at age 7.
Frank Robinson.
Frank Robinson at our house, taking a nap. But I just remember, of course, that classic helmet he wore. The white helmet with the C, but he had all the tools, no doubt. What a story he was. He was traded to the Orioles and wins a Triple Crown, but was some kind of player.
Yeah, he was an old 30, they said.
Yeah. Right.
A guy, most people think Frank Robinson's one of the greatest of all time, top 5, 10, whatever the list you want it to be. A guy that's underrated, and I'm trying to learn as much as I can about is Vada Pinson.
Oh, I thought that's who we were going to say. Vada Pinson should be in the Hall of Fame.
Mm-hmm.
Period. I mean, his numbers speak for themselves.
Yeah, 2,500 hits.
Yeah, and I love Vada. I remember, again, as a kid, he always was so kind to me, and he was just so smooth, as I remember. It's funny, classy. Vada had everything just right. His shoes were polished. Uniform always looked great. But it's funny. I took that, and later when I coached a little bit in high school, my freshman kids, I always had them polish their shoes. That's because of Vada Pinson.
That's awesome.
Yeah. He had it all. Yeah.
You wonder, he coached some. He was in coaching, but he died really young. He died in 1995, I believe, and you just have to wonder if he was still alive and still in the front of presence of mind of some folks. Because, I mean, honestly, if you put Harold Baines in the Hall of Fame, I could start saying that about a lot of people now with Dale Murphy and Don Mangley and some people like that. But Vada Pinson, by all accounts, and he would lead the league in hits, and he would, 200 hits. And of course, when Pete came up, they both were getting hits. Yeah. On the pitching side, what about Jim Maloney?
Dad said he was the hardest thrower in baseball. He could go toe to toe with Sandy Koufax. Jim's amazing. I tell you, he's an amazing person. I love when he comes into town. He's just a wonderful human being. But yeah, I remember Jim pitching. He could, as they would say, he could bring it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, Jim O'Toole as well.
O'Toole, yeah. Jim was probably more of a crafty pitcher, control pitcher. Didn't throw as hard as Jim Maloney, but Jim was a good, excellent pitcher. Yeah.
And then the funny thing is, we named my first son Joey. He was born during Joey Votto's MVP season. Yeah. And then my next son was born 5 years later, and I tried to name him Jay. Yeah. And of course, Jay Bruce was playing for the Reds, but I said, hey, if you put Joey and Jay together, that's a Reds pitcher right there.
Fine pitcher too. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
He was good. Yeah. What about, you mentioned Pete Rose, and certainly you were around Pete probably, I would assume, throughout your life. Here, I haven't gotten to talk to him yet. I've reached out to his people. Yeah. I'd love to have him on. But we did have the guy, Keith O'Brien, who wrote the recent book about him and certainly told the good and the bad about Pete. Yeah. But as a younger guy, I don't even remember the record breaker because I was 4.5, 5 years old at that point.
Right.
I want to know more about Pete the player.
Yeah.
So as someone as yourself who was around Pete, got to see Pete play in his prime, what did you think of Pete?
Yeah. Pete was a baseball genius, first of all, a mind that I've never seen anything since, just a baseball mind. The hardest worker, and I saw a bunch of them, the hardest worker, hands down. It was fun to see him, and I think that helped instill a work ethic in me. Dad was a hard worker too, but I just remember him just, in the batting cage, just relentless, and his bat control is something that stands out to me. I remember just standing behind the batting cage and watching him, and he if a coach, for instance, was walking down the right field ball line, he'd say, "Watch me, I'll hit so and so," and he'd line a line drive within 10 feet of him. But he had that tremendous bat control. But he was just a brilliant baseball player. He was an excellent runner. I don't think anyone in baseball got more out of their talent than Pete did. The scouting report nowadays, they probably wouldn't even have looked at him. But he was a self-made ball player, and the records speak for itself.
Well, even then, he wasn't. I mean, it's kind of amazing that he got signed at all, and it was he had a relative certainly, but it was kind of like, hey, take a look at this, take a look at him, and he gets sent out to New York State to go to minor leagues the first time, and they didn't think he'd stay around. At all.
Triple hitting machine, I remember. I think.
Yeah.
In the minor leagues. Yeah.
Just amazing.
What a career. the other side of that is the sad part.
Mm-hmm.
It's a shame that it's turned out like this for him. I always felt the impact he could have made on young players. He was excellent with young players. He was a great teacher, and even for me, I just remember him always being encouraging. He made me feel I was a lot better than I was. But that's the kind of person he was. He loved helping kids, and that's the tragedy of this ending for him.
Yeah, he loved baseball so much, it seems like.
Yeah.
Well, your dad, Joe Nuxhall, and we already mentioned it, but he went on to be one of the most influential people within Reds country, or around Reds country. The bulk of his career spent with Marty Brennaman. Marty talks glowingly of him, obviously.
Yeah.
The team of Marty and Joe honestly was synonymous with the Reds as Pete and Johnny, Eric and Barry. I mean, throughout history of the time from when Marty joined the booth there in '74, it just was the way it was, wasn't it? I mean, it was in Kroger commercials and all the things they did. Talk about kind of their relationship, but also the influence like that they kind of had on us as fans. We couldn't watch every game on TV, but boy, they painted the picture.
Yeah, they were definitely our eyes of the game, no doubt. Yeah, just a unique duo. They were like a married couple. He and Dad's probably spent as much time together as their own marriages. But, just so many great memories with them. The calls, I can still vividly remember Dad, getting so excited and calling the home runs and such, and Marty, just a vintage voice. They were quite a duo, and I'm grateful we got to hear so much of it during the Big Red Machine days. It's
sure,
special memories. Yeah.
When I talked to Marty, we talked about even Pete's hit, and you can hear your dad in the background just cheering it on. Get down. Marty immediately said, "I was not bothered by that. He didn't step on my call. Yeah. It's part of the fabric of that play." I think of Dave Lapham as well with the Bengals. I went to broadcast school at Ohio State. Like that's what I wanted to do, and I still do a little bit with high school football and basketball and things like that. And it's you've got to let it all kind of seep in, and that epitomizes your dad and Marty together. I think the Pete call. I mean,
he never made an apology for being a homer. I mean, that's the way it was. That's the way it was going to be till the end.
We had to go to my son's soccer game yesterday, late afternoon. So we left at the 2-minute drill of the Bengals game, and I didn't here in Columbus. I don't remember, what station carries the Bengals, and I knew the Reds were probably on 700. So, and we can get that here, but so we're going up north from here, and I just pulled up XM radio. Of course, they had the home call from Carolina, and my son's in the back seat. He's 13, almost 14, and he's like, "Man, sounds like they're rooting for the Panthers." And I said, "Well, they are. They're paid by the Panthers. This is the Panthers." He's like, "Yeah, but wouldn't you even try to be, down the middle a little bit?" And I said, "Nope."
That's the way it should be.
Yeah, no, it's the home team broadcast, and I guess I would ask you this before we kind of turn the page a little bit. Like, Marty became known as the guy that would tell it like it was, how he thought it was, and he would not shy away from criticizing.
Nope.
Obviously, your dad known more of like former player, kind of saw it from their angle a little bit more. Did Dad ever kind of get a little bit oil and water type thing, or how did your dad feel about that? And obviously your dad didn't really do much of that as far as being overly critical.
I think it was a good yang and a good yang.
Mm-hmm.
Dad respected Marty's opinions and vice versa. Like you said, Dad was a former player, so he was, I think, a little more accepting of a player, making an error here or there.
Mm-hmm.
I think for Dad, it was all about hustle. As long as you're going full bore, that's fine. He's not going to make any criticism. But Marty. Marty, you got what you got. We respected that about him, no doubt.
I remember in 1990, my grandparents took me out west, and we left, and the Reds were up by whatever it was, 9, 10, 11 games. And by the time we got back, they made a West Coast swing, and it was down to like 3 games. And we drove into town, and we actually got back just in time to go to church with my parents and my sister, where we would go to church. And we listened, and Marty actually came on the air on a Sunday morning on WLW, and he apologized for something he had said the night before. Yeah. I'll never forget. I can't remember who it was that had offended him. He said, I took it a little too far.
Yeah, fair enough. Fair enough.
Hey, so I want to share, if I ever have a guest where I do have a personal connection at all, and this kind of shows what you were saying about your dad. I can't remember if it was December of 96 or like early 97, but they had the first Reds Fest. And I was given 2 tickets, and my grandfather and I drove down and went to Reds Fest. And my grandpa brought with him, when his mother gave birth to him, she died like a few days later.
Oh, wow.
And so that was 36. Wow. And then in 41, my great grandfather remarried. And their honeymoon was to go to Cincinnati to a game. And you mentioned not having I-75. Well, they live south of Zanesville, north of Marietta, so that, a long way away. Right. It takes 3 hours now to get there, but who knows? Right. So my great grandfather went to Cincinnati to go to Crosley Field. That was his honeymoon, which is pretty awesome. But he brought home a program, and my grandfather still has that today. And there in 1996 or 97, we took that with us to Reds Fest because he wanted to meet your dad.
I'll be darned.
And your dad had just come off stage, and he was off to the side. I think he's about to go home, and one of the workers there had handed him a Diet Coke to drink, and he stood there kind of holding that Coke. But my grandpa and I walked up to him and said, "Hey, we just wanted to show you this." And he gave us a few minutes, and my grandfather was just he was so happy. And your dad was like, "Boy, that's even before my time, and but 1941 game program." Wow. So that was pretty cool. That's our experience.
Yeah, that's probably Johnny Vandermeer was in that, right?
Yeah, I would assume so. Yeah. I think the story though goes that even he got over there and it rained for 2 days or 3 days, and I don't think he got to see a game. They went to the ballpark, but I don't think they had the game.
Wow.
All right, so let's talk a little bit about the work in the community a little deeper. For us Reds fans, certainly the Miracle League, we see it on back on Fox Sports or then Bally's or whatever they're on at the time. We've seen them profile the Miracle League fields, but tell me how it was hatched. How did this kind of come to life?
Yeah, so to shorten a very long story, so people ask, why did you do this? Why was your dad interested in this? So first of all, Dad had 3 brothers. One of his brothers, my Uncle Bob, had a daughter that was born with severe disabilities. Ironically, she and I were born within 24 hours of each other. And it was a hard life. Shauna was her name. It was hard. I think Dad saw how difficult it was raising a child with this severe disability. So I think that planted a seed for Dad, and certainly did for myself and my brother. So that kind of, we took that experience and took it and used it to help other kids with disabilities. So the Miracle League itself, I was watching a HBO special, Bryant Gumbel was doing Real Sports. And it was a story about a little girl with brittle bone disease. She lived in a little town just outside of Atlanta, and Lauren Gundler was her name. Lauren would come home with the paperwork to play softball and volleyball and basketball, and her parents were always saying, "Lauren, you can't play sports." And the mother got an idea. Well, what if we build a ball field out of rubber where kids could use walkers and wheelchairs? And the townspeople, they raised money and they built this field. They called it the Miracle League. And I saw that and like, wow, we're gonna make this happen somehow. So Dad was still living at the time. I got that DVD of Real Sports. I remember showing it to Dad in his rec recreation room. We're both in tears. Dad was a big crier. I'm even worse than he is. And I think we just kind of looked at each other somehow, some way, someday we're gonna make that happen. And we drudged along for 6 years, trying to raise the money, and an amazing story of just community giving. In the end, we had a $3 million facility, 2.5 million donated in labor and materials. And I tell people all the time, Dad set that foundation. I would have never been able to get in the doors that I could had Dad not been the person that he was, the way he treated people. So we were able to meet with people, and connections I made. And, it was instilled in me, how to treat people. Dad always said it never cost a penny to be nice to people, and it benefited me in a way. I treated my high school buddies, came back here 40 some years later, my high school football buddies, kids I coached and taught, helped with this project. But it's been amazing. We opened it in 2012. We now serve nearly 300 kids. I say kids, ages 4 to, we actually had an 80-year-old that was just set to play last spring, and unfortunately he passed away. Then we have school visits that come out. So we serve nearly 1,000 kids with special needs from all over, really, the tri-state. We've had them from Indiana, Kentucky, and mostly, of course, in the greater Butler County and Cincinnati area. But it's just been a great thing for me. I tell people I have the greatest non-volunteer job on earth, really. It's so rewarding every Saturday to see the kids out there playing and having fun. We try to give them a major league experience. We have sound system, we have walkout music for them, we have a video board, we have great announcers. It's just we call it the Joy Factory. So it's just a fun time.
When I know Sean Casey's been pretty heavily involved, and they built one over near Pittsburgh, where he's from. Talk about some of the involvement from guys like him.
First thing I did when I got that, I remember getting that DVD, I sent it to Sean, and Sean had a little more firepower over there. He was able to raise money in about a year, 6 months, and built his, I think, a year or two before we opened.
Okay.
And it's been fantastic. Sean's one of the most amazing. Doesn't have anything to do with baseball. He's one of the most amazing human beings that I've ever met, and I'm so happy for him and what he's done. And we've been able to do some great things together. We had the idea. I remember talking to him a few years ago. I thought, one of the great things you get to do in baseball is take road trips. I said, what if we have road trips for our kids? So year before last, he brought his players over to play at our field, which was phenomenal. And then last summer, we met with his team and 2 other teams, Iowa and New Jersey, in Pigeon Forge. Had a experience down there, and then this past summer, we took our players over to Pittsburgh, and it was amazing for our kids and our families.
That is amazing. How can people continue to help? What are some ways people can do?
It's volunteerism. Certainly funding is always going to be on the forefront to keep. We never stop dreaming for our kids. We've added so much since we opened in 2012. We've added playgrounds. We added a 18-hole wheelchair accessible miniature golf course. All of our kids who play in our leagues are members of the club, so they can come and play mini golf anytime. And then we have our next big dream, which is to build a year-round facility. We call it the Joe Nuxhall Hope Center. It's going to be a full-size gymnasium. We have a multi-purpose room plan where we'll have specialized equipment and such. We hope to have some therapy available with Children's Hospital. And then on the personal side, there'll be a large meeting room and memorabilia room. So all the stuff that was in Mom and Dad's basement and our basement will now have a home. And I think people will be interested in seeing it. We've got, so many neat little things. Dad's, World Series rings, for instance, the bat all-star game that he played in, I think it was 55 or 6, signed by all the players. You got Hank Aaron and Stan Musial. So people get to see things like that. Some of his old hats and gloves. I think people will be interested in seeing that.
That is great. Now you can go to nuxhallmiracleleague.org for more information.
Yes.
And whether maybe you have someone who'd like to play there, or if you'd like to help out in any way. I know you do. I know there was a walk, wasn't there, from Hamilton to the ballpark or something like that?
It's another dad connection. This young man was on the grounds crew working down when he was, I think, in high school, and befriended Dad. And he had heard a few years ago, former principal from Hamilton, who was Mr. Alf was his name, was a good friend of Dad's. Tom Alf walked from Hamilton to the ballpark. And a friend, Ben Otto's his name, thought that was just a great idea. So he started this walk with another friend of his, Eric Judd, and it's just grown from there. I think they just raised nearly $12,000, 21-mile walk. That's amazing.
Yeah, that was on Tuesday, September 17th. They went from the Miracle League fields to downtown Cincinnati to a ball game. Got their picture taken with your dad's statue. That's really neat. You've got the Miracle Ball coming up on Friday, October 25th at the Oscar Event Center.
Yeah, that's our major fundraiser each year. That's going well. Gosh, it's sold out probably a month ago. Jungle Gym's Oscar Center. Jungle Gym's been great to us. So, we honor each year someone with a dad's. It's called the Joe Nuxhall Humanitarian Award, and we're really happy this year to be honoring one of our own board members who's been a huge part, Larry Tischler. We're anxious to present Larry with we call it the Nuxie. So it's going to be a special night. We've honored Sean Casey before, and Marty was honored one of our first years. Sparky Anderson, Anthony Munoz. We've had quite a list of outstanding nominees.
Well, even if it was just the on-field and then radio booth, we would have loved your dad. But the spirit of giving and that goes on through you and everything, that's really special. So we really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Well, Kim, thanks so much for joining me today, and I really appreciate the time you've given me. Thank you.
I appreciate it, Seth. Enjoy. Thank you. Take care.
All right. Hang on the line here real quick.
All right.